This is a long and sordid story which goes back to 2013 when the hospital did a referral asking help from social services for a single parent who was struggling to cope with the 24-hour care needs of her children. This particular referral went from 23 to 2014, resulting in no help because social services said there was nothing wrong with my kids and I was just making their care needs up. Then I then struggled on for another year by myself, and in 2015 the hospital did a re-referral because I was at that point feeling suicidal because I was so exhausted and struggling and not managing to cope. From 2015 to 2017, social services still carried on the same performance of saying there was nothing wrong with my children and I was making stuff up. By 2017, we reached a complete impasse because I refused to interact with them because they were providing nothing and no support. In fact, at this point, it took them from when they offered a cleaner in 2016, 80 weeks to provide a cleaner. So at that point, I just said, I can't interact with you anymore. You'll have to speak to my brother who was in Scotland. At that point, I then realised that I could have asked for advocates all the way along. The only people I'd had advocating for me for the previous years since 2013 was friends. And the friends just kept getting burnt out. They were way out of their league in terms of what they knew about the law. I'm a bit of a Googling queen, so I did a bit of Googling and found that I could get an advocate for my younger son, who was under 18 at the time. And that seemed to work really well. It's a rather difficult to understand setup because I wasn't allowed to be involved in any of the meetings, but it worked well for him, and my son started making complaints about social services. At the same time, I realised that there was a potential of getting advocates for myself and my older son. Bizarrely, social services hadn't pointed that out at any time in the last X number of years and just let me struggle on. So I then requested from social services 2 Care Act advocates. Well, you wouldn't believe the shenanigans that involved to get that. The social worker just kept not organising it, his manager just kept telling the social worker to organise it, even including sending emails to me saying, social worker number 12, sort out this issue and get advocates. And social worker number 12 wasn't even on the email list, and I remember pointing that out on a Friday as I chuckled sitting at the computer. In fact, that particular social worker was taken off our case because he just couldn't get his act together to organise advocates. Finally, advocates were appointed from a local company, and they both seemed really nice. They seemed on the case. They came to meet me together, and they said, well, I really think you need some legal help, but we can certainly help you at this moment. And I said, well, I can't actually go for legal right this now because I need to follow the complaints procedure with Hounslow Council. Well, as I said, they seemed really nice. They turned up to 1 or 2 meetings, and that was 2017. I then realised in this year, sort of May of this year, that actually they didn't turn up to that many meetings. I would send emails asking for help, which weren't responded to. I would maybe then email the main office, and then someone would contact me. They turned up late for meetings. They didn't come for meetings. They didn't put the complaints letters in that I asked, and it just went on. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. These are people who are supposed to be working on my side. So I then had to do many emails and requests through the council trying to find out who appointed these particular advocates and who was organising the advocacy agency. Eventually, after many more weeks, it actually was tracked down to Hestia, who were organising the advocates. And I said I wasn't very happy, but I didn't understand at the time whether I had so many hours a week or so many hours a month. Anyway, it was decided that I didn't want to have those advocates anymore as they'd been particularly useless and particularly had messed up one complaint which I had with social services entirely. So where are we now with the advocacy? Well, I dismissed the last crew, but then that left the manager of Hestia with a little bit of an issue. He suggested, how about we go back to the last crew, but just recruit someone more senior? And I went, no, I don't think so. So then he had to look for someone else, and then that took a number of weeks. And then he suggested, how about one of his already employed employees who was working as a support worker but training to be an advocate. Hadn't finished his training, but thought he might be a good fit. Wasn't too keen because I really wanted someone with 20+ experience to deal with all these issues that I've got. Anyway, I accepted this guy. I didn't actually get to meet him, sadly, though. I spoke to him a couple of times on the phone and he seemed very pleasant, but he did sound very inexperienced. And sadly, I didn't get to meet him at all because he died. It took one of my support workers a week to actually tell me this and pluck up courage to tell me about it. And then that meant that the manager at Hestia then had to look again. He still muttered about going back to the previous agency, and I said no. And then he was talking about it was expensive, and I said that really isn't my problem. Then So we are still struggling. Still, this is probably about 6 or 8 weeks later, I still haven't got an advocate. Today I got an email saying that they were going to appoint one advocate from a different agency, and this was her name. It's about 6 o'clock now on Monday. Still haven't had a phone call from her. But the shocking thing was, he thought one advocate could cope for 3. And how does that work in terms of confidentiality? I need a whole wall of advocates, and just because we happen to live at the same address doesn't mean we just need one advocate.